How much money you need for a down payment? That's the topic for today's episode, and without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome back and thank you for subscribing. So in today's video, we're going to talk about how much do you need for a down payment and what are the sources of funding? How can you actually get to them? So before we dive into the content, let's list the different type of mortgages available out there for you. So you have VA loans, FHA loans, we have the traditional / residential type of loans, and we also have commercial. So to start, we're gonna go over the VA loans. So VA loans are actually loans available for veterans. So yes, you have to be a veteran in order to qualify. And the minimum down payment required for this is actually 0%, which is actually a great deal if you don't have enough saved. You still have to cover some of the costs for the closing costs, but that's easily taken care of with credit cards or maybe some of the savings that you have. In order to qualify for a VA loan, you will have to have a credit score of at least 620. But you have to keep in mind that when you put 0% down, you actually have to pay for a VA fee. And that could be easily avoided if you actually put down a 5%. Assuming you have a house with an asking price of $100,000, if you decide to use a VA loan, chances are you won't have to worry about putting any down payment. But if you don't want to worry about paying the VA funding fee, then you put a $5,000 down payment, which is the equivalent of the 5%. Now, so that's one category. Now we're going to move on to FHA. So FHA stands for Federal Housing Administration, and these are typically loans that will require you to put down somewhere between 3 to 3.5% of a down payment. So let's say, for example, if you have some savings available and you find a house for $100,000, then you have to put down somewhere between $3,000 to $3,500 as a down payment. And the requirements for the credit score are actually typically lower. So you will need a 580 credit score. So the reason why I'm listing these two loans all the way at the top is because in order for you to leverage these, you're gonna have to reside in the property. So you're gonna have to find one type of property that has somewhere between 1 to 4 families in either one of them. So for VA loans, you have to live in the property no matter what. So I would suggest that if you're planning to purchase a house for investment purposes, that you find one that has 1 to 4 families and you reside in one of them and you rent out the other 3. The same thing or a similar situation applies for FHA loans. So for FHAs, you have to reside in the house for at least 1 year. So what you can do is either buy a single family and just live there, and then a year later you just move out, or just simply do the same investment in a housing that has the capacity to house 1 to 4 families in one structure. So same thing, you live in one and then you just rent out the other 3. Now, for traditional and residential, I think that's the one that we typically hear about the most. So for this type of lending, you will need about a 20% down payment. So if the asking price of your house is $100,000, then you're gonna have to put down $20,000 for the down payment of your house. Now, if you want to go, the minimum credit score that you need for a residential is 620 as well. So now moving on to the commercial, that will require a bit more money down. Typically, if you're lucky, you can get it for 25%. You put down, let's say, assuming that the investment property costs $100,000, you're gonna have to put down $25,000. And typically, the FICO score requirements, your credit score requirements, has to be of at least 650. And I believe the assumption is, well, this person, if it's gonna invest, he or she must have money, or the company itself has to have money. So the requirements are a little bit more strict, and you will require a little bit more paperwork, but that's not to say that it's not possible. And then whenever you're buying anything that is commercial, that means anything that's 5 units and above, you cannot reside there. They actually make you sign a disclosure attesting that you will not reside or have no intentions of residing in that property anywhere in the near future. So that's it in terms of how much money you need. So now I'm going to talk about funding, right? How do you actually get funding for your down payment? One way is to do it through savings. That's a great way if you have been planning for a long time. But let's say you decide overnight or maybe a year from today that you want to invest in a property, chances are you might not have enough down payment. And if you do, congratulations. But for those that don't or are falling short, there are other ways where you can actually come up with the money. So one of them, it's credit cards. Yes, I know it sounds really crazy, but yes, you can leverage credit cards for a down payment. And if you don't know how to actually get the money out of the credit cards, here's a link that you can actually go over and take a look at the video and the content, and hopefully you'll find it helpful. And the other way is through a cash-out refinance. So for those who don't know what a cash-out refinance is, I basically view it as an exchange of something. So you go to a bank, you take your property, and you say, hey, bank XYZ, I want to do a cash-out refinance on this property. What can I get for it? And basically, they're going to assess it. They're going to evaluate it and say, oh, you know what? I'll give you up to 80% of what it's worth. And they're going to become the new owners temporarily. And they're going to issue a certain amount of money. And then you're going to take that money and you're going to use it either to invest on a flip or to put it as a down payment, whatever is it that you want to do with it, right? And if you want to learn more about cash-out refinance in details, here's a link that you can actually refer to. Now, once you get that money, either through credit cards or giftings and stuff like that, or even through a cash-out refinance, you have to consider the season. You have to let your money to season. And what does that mean? You need to be able to prove where the money is coming from, and it actually has to remain in your account for at least 60 days. So let's say, for example, you go ahead and you take money out of the credit cards. You start doing that, you plan ahead, maybe even before you find a good property, because you want to make sure you have enough funding in your account. So you start taking money out of the credit cards and you leave it in your month and you wait for 60 days in your account. And then after that 60-day period, that's when you go ahead and you apply for a loan. Now, not all fundings will need to be seasoned in your account. So for example, any money that comes through your employer, like your paycheck, maybe even a gift from family, parents and stuff like that, you don't have to prove or like wait that seasoning period, because as long as they issue you a letter, then you can actually evidence, okay, well, this money is legit. That's basically what it comes down to. They want to see that the money that is sitting in your account is actually legitimate and it's not something that just popped out of thin air and next thing you know, it's going to disappear overnight. So back to the parents and your siblings, if somebody decides to give you the money, right, they're going to have to issue you a letter and say, hey, well, I'm giving Lucy $10,000 as a gift, so that way this person can use that money as a down payment. Never say lending, because now the bank is going to think, okay, now this person is going to have to return the money to their friend or their parents or to us. And basically, it's just not going to look good, because there's a possibility that you might default. So if you are receiving money as a gift, make sure that there's something in writing that can attest that it is actually a gift. However, your friends or your family are going to have to wait the 60-day period. They are the ones who are going to have to evidence that 60-day period. However, there's a way to quote unquote bypass this, and that's basically through a cash-out refinance. So if you're doing a cash-out refinance, right, and then immediately want to do the purchasing, then you will have to wait that 60-day period. But I'm not sure if this is across the board with all the banks. I know mine did it, but the trick is to be able to do it with the same bank. So for the purchase of my 17 unit, what I did, and if you don't know how I did it, here's the link as well, so you can refer to it. So the way that the lender worked with me was that they were willing to issue a money or funding for a cash-out refinance, and then on the same day also close on the financing of the property. So let's say, for example, I wanted to buy a property that was worth $100,000, but I needed to put 25% down. So that's $25K, which means I'm gonna have to finance the remaining $75K. So that same lender was willing to do a cash-out refinance on one of my properties and gave me the money for that. And then at the same time, did the closing for the financing of the rest, which is the remaining $75,000. And it was all closed within one same day. So when that happens, you don't have to wait for the money to season, and it's basically because the lender has the ability to see that where the money is coming from. So if the money is coming from the same bank that is issuing you the financing, then I mean, it will be pointless for you to have to like evidence that money and just let it sit there. I remember that when I did that, I actually was working on a closing for another 2-3 days, and the bank was okay in terms of the seasoning of the money. They didn't require that I have to leave the money in my account for up to 60 days. I think it all depends on the bank. So if you don't know, I'll suggest you just find out, just walk up to any lender or any potential lenders that you're planning to work with, and you ask them and explain them. Always be transparent with them and tell them, hey, I want to invest in this property, but I don't have the money for down payment in cash right now in my bank account. So I was planning to do a cash-out refinance. Do you want the money to remain in my account for the next 60 days or so? Or is it okay if I show you where the money is coming from, and then you can just go ahead and like allow me to use that money as a down payment for this property that I'm trying to buy? And chances are they are going to be okay with it. And if not, then just move on to the next lender. Maybe that one person doesn't understand what you're saying. That's okay. There's plenty of other lenders out here that you can actually use and go and build relationships with. And so yeah, I think that's it for today. If you find this information helpful, please feel free to leave me a comment below, hit the like button, or just simply subscribe. Also, if you know about someone who you think can leverage this information for good use, feel free to just forward the video to them. And until then, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.